The classroom fell silent as three boys surrounded Emma's desk, their fingers pointing accusingly at the small blonde girl who sat frozen, clutching her pencils so tightly her knuckles turned white. The morning had started like any other Tuesday at Riverside Elementary, but what happened next would become a moment that would ripple through the entire school community, teaching a lesson far more valuable than anything written in textbooks. Emma Martinez was 8 years old, with bright blue eyes that held an ocean of quiet dignity despite the storm brewing around her. Her uniform was always pristine, her homework always complete, and her manners impeccable. Qualities instilled by her mother, Sophia, who worked as a housekeeper for several families in their military town. Sophia had raised Emma alone since her husband deployed overseas, teaching her daughter that dignity wasn't determined by job titles or bank accounts, but by the integrity of one's character and the kindness in one's heart. If you believe in the power of kindness, in standing up for those who cannot stand up for themselves, and in teaching our children that everyone deserves respect regardless of their circumstances, please like this video, leave a comment sharing your thoughts, and subscribe to Kindness Corner. Your support helps us share stories that matter, stories that remind us of our shared humanity. The trouble had begun during morning announcements when Mrs. Peterson, a veteran teacher with 25 years of experience, but an unfortunate habit of making assumptions, had asked each student to share what their parents did for work as part of a career day preparation. The children had gone around the room sharing with varying degrees of pride and enthusiasm: doctors, lawyers, business owners, teachers. When Emma's turn came, she had spoken softly but clearly, her voice carrying the unmistakable note of pride that belongs to a child who truly loves their parent. "My dad is a general in the Army," she had said simply, her small chin lifting slightly as she spoke. "He's serving overseas right now, protecting our country." The reaction was immediate. Three boys from the back row, children of affluent parents who had unconsciously absorbed certain prejudices from overheard conversations, began to snicker. Tyler Morrison, the ringleader, whose father owned a successful car dealership, spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. "That's impossible," he announced with the cruel certainty that sometimes possesses children who don't yet understand the weight of their words. "Your mom is a maid. She cleans my house. There's no way your dad is a general. You're lying." Emma's face had flushed crimson, but she held her ground. "My mom is a housekeeper, and she works very hard," she responded, her voice trembling but steady. "And my dad is a general. Both things are true." The classroom erupted in whispers and giggles. Mrs. Peterson, instead of immediately addressing the situation with the sensitivity it required, made a choice that would haunt her professional conscience for years to come. Perhaps she was tired, perhaps she had unconsciously absorbed the same class prejudices that infected her students, or perhaps she simply wasn't paying close enough attention to the pain spreading across Emma's face. Whatever the reason, her response was devastating. "Emma," Mrs. Peterson had said with a patronizing smile that made the little girl's heart sink, "it's important to tell the truth in this classroom. I understand that sometimes we might exaggerate or imagine things about our parents because we want them to be special, but honesty is always the best policy. Your mother does very important work as a housekeeper. There's no shame in that. But let's not make up stories about your father, shall we?" The classroom had gone silent then, but it was the terrible silence of collective cruelty, the kind that presses down on a child's shoulders like an unbearable weight. Emma's eyes had filled with tears that she refused to let fall. She opened her mouth to protest, to explain, to defend her father's honor, but the words caught in her throat. How could she prove what was true when no one believed her? How could she make them understand that her mother's work didn't diminish her father's achievements, that both were worthy of respect, that their family's worth wasn't measured by others' perceptions? The boys had continued their taunting during recess, calling her the liar and the maid's daughter who makes up stories. Emma had endured it with a quiet strength that would have made her father immensely proud. But inside, her heart was breaking into 1,000 pieces. She had tried to call her mother during lunch, but Sophia was at work, her phone turned off as it always was during working hours, because she believed in giving her employers her full attention and effort. What Emma didn't know, what none of them knew, was that her father, General Marcus Thompson, had been granted an unexpected, brief leave due to a scheduling change in his deployment rotation. He had wanted to surprise his daughter, to show up at her school unannounced and sweep her into his arms the way he had dreamed of doing during the long, lonely months overseas. He had coordinated with Sophia, who had managed to sneak away from work to meet him at the airport that morning, and together they had planned to arrive at the school just in time for lunch. When General Thompson walked through the school's front entrance, still in his dress uniform with 4 stars gleaming on his shoulders and an impressive array of ribbons and medals decorating his chest, the administrative staff had nearly dropped their coffee cups. The principal, Mr. Hendricks, had practically stumbled over himself to greet the distinguished visitor, stammering something about what an honor it was to have him there. Behind the general stood Sophia, her work uniform still visible beneath her coat, her eyes anxious but hopeful, praying that this surprise would bring joy to her daughter rather than more pain. They were directed toward Emma's classroom, and as they walked down the corridor, General Thompson listened as Sophia quietly explained what had been happening at school, how some of the children had been cruel, how the teacher had dismissed Emma's truth. With each word, the general's jaw tightened, but his eyes remained soft when he thought of his daughter bearing this burden alone. When they reached Mrs. Peterson's classroom, they could hear raised voices through the door. The general paused, his hand on the doorknob, listening as Tyler Morrison's voice rang out clearly. "Stop lying, Maid's kid. Your dad is probably just some regular soldier, if he even exists at all." The sound of children laughing followed, and then Mrs. Peterson's voice, weary and dismissive. All right, that's enough. Emma, perhaps this will be a lesson about the importance of honesty." General Marcus Thompson opened the door. The effect was instantaneous and profound. The classroom fell into absolute silence as the 4-star general stepped through the doorway, his presence commanding immediate attention and respect. Every eye in the room turned toward him, taking in the uniform, the stars, the bearing of a man who had dedicated his life to service and leadership. He walked directly to Emma's desk, his combat boots making authoritative sounds against the linoleum floor, and for a moment, Emma simply stared at him in disbelief, her tear-stained face transforming from despair to joy in the space of a heartbeat. "Daddy," she whispered, the word barely audible but carrying the weight of months of longing and the pain of this terrible day. "Hello, sweetheart," General Thompson said, his voice gentle but carrying to every corner of the now silent room. He knelt beside her desk, bringing himself to her level despite the formality of his uniform, and opened his arms. Emma flew into them, her small body shaking with sobs of relief and happiness, as her father held her close, one hand cradling the back of her head the way he had since she was an infant. The general stood, lifting Emma with him, and then turned to face the classroom. His expression was not angry but rather deeply disappointed, the look of a leader who has discovered that those under his protection have failed to uphold the values he holds dear. "My name is General Marcus Thompson," he said, his voice calm but resonating with unmistakable authority. "This is my daughter, Emma. And this," he gestured to Sophia, who had entered behind him, her eyes also glistening with tears, "is my wife, Sophia, whose work ethic, integrity, and dedication to providing for our family while I serve overseas makes her every bit as much a hero as anyone who has ever worn this uniform." Mrs. Peterson had gone pale, her hands trembling as she gripped the edge of her desk. The 3 boys who had tormented Emma looked like they wanted to disappear into the floor. The rest of the students watched in stunned silence as the general continued. "My wife works as a housekeeper because it allows her the flexibility to be there for our daughter while I'm deployed, because she takes pride in honest work honestly done, and because she understands that there is no shame in any profession performed with dignity and excellence. The fact that some of you, and apparently some adults, believe that her profession somehow negates my rank or our family's worth tells me that we have failed to teach a fundamental lesson about respect and dignity." He set Emma down gently, keeping one hand on her shoulder. "Every person in this room comes from a family that contributes to our society in different ways. The person who cleans your home works just as hard as the person who runs a company. The person who serves your food is just as deserving of respect as the person who sits in a courtroom. and a child should never, ever be mocked or disbelieved because of what their parents do for a living. If this story has touched your heart, if you believe in teaching our children the values of respect and dignity for all people regardless of their profession or circumstances, please take a moment to like this video and share it with others who need to hear this message. Comment below with your thoughts, or a time when you witnessed true character triumph over prejudice. General Thompson turned to Mrs. Peterson, who looked like she might cry. "Ma'am, I served in combat zones to protect the freedom and dignity of all Americans, not just those in certain tax brackets. I would hope that in a classroom, of all places, we would honor that ideal." His words were not harsh, but they carried a weight that made every adult in earshot examine their own prejudices and assumptions. The principal, Mr. Hendricks, who had followed them to the classroom, immediately stepped forward to address the situation, promising a school-wide assembly on respect and dignity, implementing new policies on bullying, and ensuring that Mrs. Peterson received additional training on cultural sensitivity and assumptions. Tyler Morrison's parents were called, and to their credit, they arrived embarrassed and apologetic, using the moment as a teaching opportunity for their son about the dangers of prejudice and the importance of respect. But the most powerful moment came at the end of the school day, when General Thompson stood before the entire school during an impromptu assembly. With Emma on one side and Sophia on the other, he spoke about service, about dignity, about the fact that his wife's hands might clean homes, but they also held their daughter when she was scared, prepared meals with love, and worked tirelessly to keep their family strong during his absence. He spoke about how true strength comes not from rank or wealth, but from character and integrity. Before this story ends, please take a moment to comment below. Everyone deserves respect if you believe that kindness and dignity should be our guiding principles in how we treat others, regardless of their circumstances. As General Thompson prepared to leave the school that day, Emma clutching his hand tightly as if afraid he might disappear again, Mrs. Peterson approached them hesitantly. Tears streamed down her face as she apologized profusely to Emma, to Sophia, and to the general. She didn't make excuses, didn't try to justify her failure. She simply owned it, promised to do better, and asked for forgiveness. The general, demonstrating the grace that had earned him respect throughout his military career, accepted her apology and reminded her that we all make mistakes. What matters is what we learn from them and how we grow. Years later, Emma Martinez would become an advocate for educational equity and respect in schools. Tyler Morrison would remember that day as the moment he learned that his assumptions about people based on their economic circumstances were not just wrong but harmful. Mrs. Peterson would become one of the school's most passionate teachers about dignity and respect, using her own mistake as a teaching tool about the importance of seeing beyond surface assumptions. And General Marcus Thompson's surprise visit would be remembered not as a moment of humiliation for those who had erred, but as a powerful reminder that true honor belongs to those who treat all people with dignity and respect, regardless of their station in life. The story of the Maid's daughter and the four-star general spread throughout the military community and beyond, becoming a touchstone for discussions about class, respect, and the unconscious biases that can poison even well-meaning environments. But at its heart, it remained a simple truth, that every person deserves dignity, that every honest profession deserves respect, and that sometimes the most powerful lessons come not from textbooks, but from the courage of a small girl who refused to be ashamed of her parents' honest work, and a father who reminded everyone watching that true strength comes not from looking down on others, but from lifting everyone up.